Members, just in the absence of the chair and deputy chair, I need a nomination for a temporary chair and a seconder.
Yes.
Chair, I propose Mr McLaughlin for he's a former DFP chair.
And is there a seconder?
I'll second on the basis he's not forgotten anything.
And there are no other nominations? Okay, Mr McLaughlin.
He denounced me. I know. It's getting a little skinny.
Okay, I'll keep it moving here. Doesn't work.
You please.
Do some preparatory. This is already closing the meeting. Take a few minutes to allocate the areas of discussion, you know.
Yeah.
And let them know we're open.
Just say you just close the meeting.
Yeah. Members, we'll close the meeting just for a minute or two so that we can organise ourselves.
Is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.
And who's in charge of the technology?
Okay. Just go ahead and
Okay, we've previously got the apologies for delay from the chair and vice chair. Any other apologies that we need to know about?
Just want to do apologies and stuff first.
No. Okay.
Other apologies, Chair. No apologies.
And do the draft minutes of proceedings on the 29th. Can I refer to them? They're on page 5 and 8 of your packs. Are members content that the draft minutes are an accurate record of proceedings?
Agreed.
And agreed to be published on the website?
Agreed.
And matters arising. Table of requests for information from DFP. And the summary table is on page 10 of the packs. To note.
Agreed.
And item 4 is a flexible working inquiry, stakeholder evidence via video link. And this session is being recorded by Hansard for all other electronic devices, with the exception of the tablet devices, must be switched off completely as they interfere with transmission and recording of the proceedings. And we're using Skype this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Mitchell McLaughlin.
Hello, good morning.
I'm acting chair, so if you see me moving during the course of the meeting, you know that the chairperson or the vice chairperson has arrived. But
Okay, that's fine. No problem.
and let me apologise for the slight delay. If we just kind of kick off, if you don't mind, we. Clearly, we have a number of interests. What we would like to see is, from your perspective, given the experience that you have developed, what are the main kind of opportunities? What are the main barriers to rolling out this new form of flexible working?
Okay. Well, the main opportunities are, first of all, obviously, something that's very easily measurable and quantifiable is the reduction in time spent on tour and the reduction in carbon footprint of the organisation. Now, I've just got some figures here which are quite surprising, I think. When I was doing some work with the Ordnance Survey Ireland some time ago, by having 12 of their staff working from home 2 or 3 days a week, they actually eliminated an average of 1,205 kilometres of travel per day. That's the equivalent of 1,378 miles. The travel eliminated throughout the year was 190,181 miles. And unproductive time spent travel, which was eliminated, was 5,786 hours in the year. So obviously, that was 12 people, and a bit of long journey times, a lot of them. But it obviously has a huge impact on the environment and the use of people's time. Consequently, the use, how productive they are in the hour of work. Because if you're travelling 3 hours to get to work, have 3 hours at home work instead of comes off goes to Redmond. The travel time is what's preoccupied. Now, another opportunity, very specific opportunity, which has been identified through experience rather than through theory, is increased productivity. This is obviously related to the reduction in traffic costs and faithfulness of that. And on average, it would vary from person to person and job to job, but reports of between 5 and 20% increase in productivity is quite common. Another important factor which sometimes is overlooked, which I've experienced myself, which is very important, is that through working from home on a full-time or part-time basis, people who acquire disability can continue to be economically active, contribute towards the organisation and keep their job. And an example of that is one man I know who used to work with Aircom. He's since retired, but he suffered a stroke, a minor stroke, which would have prevented him from travelling to his work because of the difficulties of actually getting from A to B, using public transport, etc. But when he recovered sufficiently, he was actually able to continue his work from a home base and remain economically active, contribute towards the organisation, and have travel every day that would simply been out of the question because he couldn't have done so.
Okay, thank you very much. Could you also give us some your own kind of experience of the code of practice? How was that developed, and how does it work in practice? And are there any particular improvements that could or should be made?
Okay. Yeah, the code of practice. Well, it was actually the very important feature, I think, of the code of practice is that it was developed by people who had experienced me working like myself, in conjunction with the Employers Association, IBEC, and very importantly, it was endorsed also by the Irish Congress and Trade Unions. And the Communication Workers Union was actually represented on the board, and again, it was part of it too. So, you had all interests really there, the interest of the employers, which is obviously very important. Without your support, people wouldn't be working at all. And the actual people who are experienced in the practicalities of e-working, and very important, otherwise then you don't get anywhere. There was also noted in conjunction with that if staff had made brief the committee, sent a briefing document to the committee, and the views that they are expressing there reflect very much the views that the trade union people would have reflected in formulating the code of practice. So really, the code of practice is quite a durable document. It's quite old now, it's quite durable. And I think that it represents the interests of all parties involved, establishing working in a fair and sustainable way.
Okay, thank you very much. If I could call in some of our committee members now, and Ian.
Okay, thank you very much.
With that, we lost you there. Ian, just introduce yourself.
Okay, Ian McRae, I'm DEP member of the committee. In respect of selecting the jobs that are suitable for flexible working, is there certain attributes that you feel are important, and the skills are important, for selecting these people, and how do you test that?
Right. Yeah. Well, the selecting the correct jobs and the correct people in parallel with that is very, very important. Because, if the person, let's put it most simply, if the person isn't capable of doing their job independently within an office environment, they certainly won't be able to of doing their job independently or relatively independently when they're away from the office, relatively unsupported environment. So to go back to the question of the jobs themselves, there's certainly certain characteristics of jobs which would be desirable to be worked. Now, to put it very simply and straightforwardly, if you're continuous touch with the public, particularly on an ad hoc basis, such as a reception area or whatever, obviously that's considered free working. But for looking at the analysis of the jobs that I've worked with people over the years, there would usually be a lot of information processing. And again, the information, reference sources are more and more becoming available online, within networks, etc. So there'd be a lot of information posting. That could include, for example, one lady who was working at telework. She was actually entering incoming invoices into the system. So the way that worked was she attended the office one day a week and basically brought the documents home with her, and then she would enter through the entries during the week. Now that was a beautifully good job reworking, because it was very, very easy to quantify how much work she was doing. So I mean, if she was putting in 100 invoices in the office, if she was only doing 80 at home, there was obviously a problem. So I mean, there could always be queries arising that you have to deal with. But that was a very nice from the point of view of evaluation. There were other jobs that had been homework, as far as I can concerned, would be people who were doing, for example, with the communications regulator, somebody who was processing applications for mobile licences, and all that was done electronically anyway, so it didn't matter where she was, whether she was in the centre of Dublin or in Tipperary, she could do that anyway. And again, there was a quantifiable issue there. You can see whether she does 10 in the office and was only doing 7 in similar circumstances, one then there was a difficulty. On the other hand, if she was doing 10 in the office and 13 at home, that was obviously a good thing. A lot of senior people now, particularly in the private sector, but also in the public sector, would e-work. They would do report writing. If you associate that with senior people, it normally is. A lot of people would e-work maybe 1 day a week, 2 days a week, whatever, because they need to sit down and get the job done with relatively few interruptions. So report writing, as long as the reference materials are at hand, and that is becoming increasingly the case, internet access to the internal network, over secure connections, etc. So, on the other hand, I have to say, you cannot take a job in isolation and say that's interest-free working. The person is also a major factor, because as I say, if they cannot work unsupported in the office, they're certainly not going to be able to work relatively unsupported from a home base.
Yeah. And in respect of the code of practice,
yeah.
It refers to the suitability of the e-workers line manager being considered having regard to the need for skills in distance management.
Yeah.
How do you determine that?
Yeah. Well, basically, let's put it like this. In my own experience, the managers do need, first of all, to be buy-in to the whole e-work concept, because if the manager is resistant, the situation becomes difficult. And no matter how well the e-work is performing the manager, if they're uncomfortable with the situation, there may be difficulties. The other thing is, at a very, very basic level, I've seen difficulties arising with managers really failing to acknowledge increasing productivity, which were proven by staff members. And it was because the managers themselves simply weren't comfortable with working with email, electronic documents themselves, because there were, or still, such people who might be older, who just have not got used to using keyboards or doing emails, etc. So it was quite telling there was an evaluation I was doing, and part of the process was to send out a questionnaire to the managers each month, at the end of each month, to sort of get their views on how it was going. And let's say there were 10 managers, I can't remember exactly, let's say there were 10. And I would send out the forms by email, and in 8 cases would come back by email completed. But in the case of 2 managers who weren't happy with it, they would be printed out, and then they would get the evaluation form handwritten by post, which didn't show, as far as I believe, that these people were comfortable with technology. On the other hand, managers, it is a big ask for some managers. If they're already managing maybe term time, people are working term time, flexi work, etc., it is quite a big ask for managers to take on also managing an e-working scenario. So, managers do need to be enthusiastic. They need to be reassured that just because somebody's working from home, it doesn't mean that they work like the ads try to promote the work when and where they want. That is not the case. They work when they're required to work within the normal parameters, and they are to be available at certain hours. There should be an agreement in place so that they are available at certain hours, and the managers should take an account of that. And also, include the workers in all activities related to work. That includes the allocation of work, even though they're out of the office. Because sometimes managers tend to, if they look over and see so-and-so's not there, to give the work to somebody else. And then the person who's left in the office ends up getting more work than they should be just because somebody's e-working. So the managers need to include the e-workers in all aspects of professional life, including work and the social aspects as well, to keep them involved within the team and the organisations. So, the manager, it is an extra ask on managers, but if managers are comfortable with the whole concept and with the objectives of what the organisation is trying to do, and with the technology required, they'll very often go that extra little step. And of course, if the right employee is e-working, not somebody who's unreliable or undependable, needs less work, they will very often be happy to go that extra step to improve their productivity and achieve the objectives of the organisation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and Peter?
Thank you, Chair. Peter Weir, MLA. I suppose following on from Ian's question, I suppose one of the areas sometimes there's a degree of reticence in terms of embracing flexible working, and particular home working, is the issue of performance management and how managers adapt to, I suppose, managing the performance of remote EU workers. I wonder if you could maybe just give us your thoughts on any differences in approach that would be needed for EU workers when it comes to the sort of performance management as opposed to the much more traditional office environment.
Yeah. Well, in the e-working scenario, really management is by results. It's not by seeing somebody sitting there at their desk, by actually seeing what they produce and what they do. So, for me and my experience has been that in an e-working scenario, that there needs to be a lot more formal reporting to management than there would be by somebody who's based in the office, as we can see. Because the manager would very quickly normally pop on if there's a difficulty arising with somebody working in the office, or the person working in the office if there's difficulty next door to that colleague, and it's more difficult to do that in an e-working scenario. So, and generally what it has done is that there's actually a bigger reporting requirement on the part of the e-worker. Now, it doesn't have to be complicated, it doesn't have to take hours to do or to read, but at the end of every week, for example, the e-worker will be required to send to the manager a report of what the objectives for the week were, or the tasks were, or the jobs or whatever, and then where the progress has been made. And if there's difficulty, those difficulties pinpointed at an early stage rather than let it go on and on and on and on, the problem becomes a bigger one. So really, reporting has to be much clearer and much more formalised without it being over complex. Another thing that happens very, very frequently is that managers would and really should keep in touch with the e-worker by having regular meetings with them, or even looking up like we're doing now on Skype, is there a problem? Because somebody's sitting in the office at home might allow a difficulty, a technical difficulty, for example, and even using Word documents become a big problem. The person in the office would sort it out, and the person sitting Skype on a very informal basis. What some managers do as well, what some organisations do as well, is they actually have on their own internal website, an area for e-workers, where there are common difficulties arising, for example, sorting out a difficulty with a printer or something like that, that the person might have to do at the office, where common troubleshooting issues are posted and the solutions are posted. But reporting is the key, and communication, I think, is key. And it doesn't have to be complex, but it has to be clear.
Well, I mean, from that point of view, you're saying in terms of the reporting mechanisms, I suppose there's a slight degree of irony here that where we're looking at more flexible working, and particularly working from home on that basis, there's a slight degree of irony in terms of a contrast that perhaps both the reporting mechanism, indeed the interaction directly with the line managers, has arguably got to be a little bit more structured and possibly a bit more formalised than it would be otherwise. Because if you like, the opportunity to perhaps simply go to the end of the corridor where the manager is on a bit more ad hoc basis, is, the opportunities that are a little bit diminished in that regard.
Yeah, but that is there isn't a bit of an irony there, an apparent irony. But really flexible work does have to be very structured.
No.
Otherwise, chaos, there can be chaos, and somebody thinks they're doing something, somebody else thinks they're doing something else. And they don't, so I mean, in all fairness, the managers, you know, it has to be on free what is going on, who's doing what, where there are problems really, because, you know, basically it's easier for a manager to handle situations where he or she sees people and can allocate work, etc. The e-working situation has to be more structured, more formalised, and, you know, better planning needs to take place, and certainly very close monitoring to see if there is a problem. But, you know, this can be difficult for people for a short period of time, but once the system begins to flow along, it should actually become very easy. And if it's not becoming very easy, the situation should be reviewed.
I mean, I suppose from that point of view, is there potential? Well, I can understand it, I suppose, in terms of the side of a paradox here, that at least initially that can place a certain level of additional burden on the line manager. Are there also a degree of advantages for the line manager in the fact that because they have to be arguably slightly more directly hands-on in terms of the structural side of it, can mean that there's a greater level of familiarity with, you know, with their staff, and indeed having to familiarity with the tasks that need to be performed, and almost, if you like, the concern that sometimes can be expressed that a line manager can become semi-detached from people, actually because of the fact that they've got to be a bit more structured in the way that they deal with it. Perhaps it gives a sort of a greater level of direct involvement from a line manager point of view.
Let's come like this. If we go back to the earlier question of the people who are e-working, you know, and the skills that they have, including their own self-management skills, if the selection process works, and that is very important in terms of jobs and the people, the system should flow along nicely.
Yeah.
It's where there is a problem at the selection phase that there can be problems. Now, you know, the thing to remember in the whole e-working scenario is there should always be, in any e-working arrangement contract, there should be definite when the reporting takes place. There should also be always a termination clause, because in some cases it just doesn't work, or people want to e-work for the wrong reasons, and therefore it becomes, instead of becoming an advantage to the organisation and a manageable system for the manager, it actually becomes a disadvantage and things go astray. So it's very, very important that A, there be a trial period, for example, for 4 months or 6 months, long enough to be realistic, and B, that there's a termination clause where the e-working scenario isn't working out, it can be terminated.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay?
Yeah, thank you very much. And Leslie?
Good morning, Leslie Cree. I'd just like to ask you a question, if I may, on e-working initiatives. What is your opinion how these best can be evaluated, including baseline data and other information? How we need to collect all of that for subsequent evaluation?
Well, the evaluation can be difficult enough, and sometimes it really goes on the gut feeling to the actual how it's working from the point of view of the manager and the e-worker. But, you know, in jobs, you know, frankly, there's jobs where it is easily quantified what people do. Assuming that the objective of the organisation is to at least maintain current levels of productivity and hopefully increase current levels of productivity. Where there is a situation where, for example, somebody is inputting data, let's say invoices or letters and applications, something like that, it's easy enough to do that in terms of the quantity of work done in that. You start when they're in the office, let's say they're doing an average of 50 a week, totally guess figure. When they're at home, they're doing a total of 70 a week. Obviously, you've got an increase in productivity. Now, where the jobs are less easy to quantify, let's say somebody doing a report, and I mean, you know, we've all come across sit down and do a report in a day, sometimes, or half a day, or whatever, and another time it could take you 3 days. So simply because of the complexity of the report, also because you may not be in the right form for doing it. So where the jobs are easily quantified, or the tasks are easily quantified, that's beautiful because you've got the information there. On the other hand, there's often, you know, there's a judgment call that's on behalf of the manager and the worker themselves. So it's just not, you know, it's not altogether crisp and clear, but people will use their judgment and their experience to evaluate how it's going. Is that right?
That's fine, but it's absolutely crucial then. I think what you're saying is it's crucial that the baseline data is known to everyone.
Yeah. For your start, there must be known, and that could be done on sort of review of outputs in the office with 3 months prior to the introduction of e-working. Then there would be a wobbly phase, possibly when people are getting started off. There might be a little week, 2 weeks, and problems are arising that we're anticipating. Maybe in terms of communications, infrastructure. But after about a month, things will settle down, and then it should be clear how the fee situation compares to the post-fee working situation.
Thank you for that.
Has he finished? Yeah, thank you very much. Michaela?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Riona. My name's Michaela Boyle, committee member. I just want to you've touched on some of the things around the training practices, but I just want to know, just maybe if you could elaborate on the training requirements and how that is evaluated and managed, and how that works between office and home.
Right, okay. Well, training requirements, there can be training in terms of that's sort of the actual possible home workers to begin with. That's when, if they need training in their actual job, then they're not, it is assumed that their professional skills are independent and good. Now, but there could be training, for example, even for somebody who's very skilled at their job, could be in the whole area of handling IT equipment, for example, hardware. That somebody, if they have a problem with a printer in a home office, for example, jamming, running out of toner, etc., that they actually know how to sort that out. Because it might be assumed that they do, but when you're working in an office environment, there's usually somebody who come along and do those sort of jobs for you. It could be very simple, straightforward training, which is for standardisation of equipment that comes in very good for the IT people. Because, if I'm at home working with a Hewlett-Packard printer, you're at home working with a Samsung printer, whatever it is, they're all different. So standardisation of equipment makes life a lot easier for the IT people. They can even put up on the website, common problems arising with whatever it is, Hewlett-Packard, such thing, how to solve them. Now, other forms of training that are needed for, frequently needed, maybe not necessarily for the potentially workers, are basically managing their time. Because, what can happen is, in a home situation, what happens off at the beginning is the people work very long hours, and then they wear themselves out, and then start working badly for short hours. So time management will be one of the areas where that could be important. Also, self-discipline in that, it's, if you're going to work, you're going to be leaving the house, you're going to be getting some exercise, a little bit of exercise between the house and the car, or the bus, or whatever.
I think so.
Also, you're going to have the sociability to the degree that you want. But in a situation where you're working at home and possibly had a family to mind leaving, it's very, very easy to get into a situation where you're going into the office in the morning, go out in the evening, and you're straight into making dinners or washing dishes or whatever it is, or whatever people do. So, a social element can become lacking from your life. So it's very important really that people keep that social element in addition to going into the office, meeting people. They have to keep themselves active and social and not become sort of a hermit who doesn't go out of the house from one Saturday to the other when they're doing the shopping.
Can I just ask on time management? Obviously within that working practice, that working from home, have you ever encountered, which could be the case in some instances, where there would be envy within other employees in that setting? And I think maybe sometimes, where you would have people maybe abusing their time management working from home, where maybe they would go to pick the children up from school or go shopping or use it as a social outlet during the day to go and meet friends. So how is that managed, and how,
Exactly.
Yeah, well, that's kind of like this. For managing e-work, they obviously working from a home base, but if you have family duties to see how most people do have, it makes it easier to deal with situations where you pick up children, or maybe at some stage you could go to the dentist or something like that. It makes it easier to deal with, but that's related to the reduction in absenteeism as well, and that you don't have to take an entire day off to do something like that. But there can be envy, but let's put it like this. People still have to do their job. Basically, people still have to do their job. Now, if they take half an hour off to go and collect the children or whatever it is, they're going to have to make up that time. At least they're going to have to make up that productivity extra. But yes, there has been a feature for people to say, oh, they work in service and they can work where they want, when they want, and all the rest of it. But it isn't the reality. The reality is that they do have to keep a disciplinary and they do have to complete the tasks required and they do have to report.
How is that policed? How is that managed and policed, Riona? I mean, how is it managed and policed that type of abuse wouldn't exist at home?
But it's really, there has to be, again it comes back in a large way to the person who is selected for e-working. The person has to be a person who's responsible, who knows what it has to do. If they do have to take time off to do something, they should communicate to the manager and say, I will not be available between, or is it okay if I'm not available between 10 and 11. But ultimately, what you're talking about is having a certain amount of work, reporting to your manager with regular intervals as to how you stand with that work, if it's behind, if it's in front, whatever. And the work has to be done. And
flexible work, okay.
Regardless of if somebody does literally take advantage, take extra time off, it should become fairly visible by the fact that they're not getting their work done. But person choice is very, very important. If somebody is going to skywalk regularly while they're in the office, they can probably skywalk more when they're at home, but that, you choose the right people. Yeah. And if their motivation is positive, that shouldn't happen.
So it's very much up to the individual.
Well, it is, ultimately, and also up to what they produce. If they're not producing, there's a problem.
Okay, thank you.
There's no magic answers, there's no.
Okay, thank you, Riona. Have we any other members on this side? Anyone? Paul, then, and for a final question.
Thank you, and thank you for coming or for being present this morning. Just in relation to the unions and how there seems to be reluctance, maybe not just from management but from unions in relation to this matter, because of either one member of staff feeling that they are being disenfranchised because they're not being offered the opportunity to have flexible working or whatever. How have you overcome that, or how do you feel we can overcome that?
Yeah, well, the unions, if you refer to the situation that is, first of all, I think it has to be clear that the objective in introducing home working is, if it is to reduce space required for home working, it has to be on the office, that's to build a large space to actually do that. If it is to reduce productivity, if it is to foster family-friendly initiatives, having said that, I'm always afraid when you say it's a family-friendly initiative, people think that they can mind children and work at the same time, which is totally out of the question from all points of view. It's not, you cannot possibly do it, as simple as that. But I think it has to be, really, not every job is suited to be working, not every person is suited to be working. So I think it has to be introduced, first of all, on a very clear thing that the following, after an analysis of suitable jobs, that the following jobs would be eligible. Then the following people, or not the following people, obviously that has to go through a clear and transparent process. But the person has to be assessed to be suitable as well. They have to be suitable. Something that's often overlooked is that the person has to have a suitable place in the home to work. You cannot stand at the table and do a day's work and then, so there's certain criteria that have to be met. And after that, there's usually certain quotas introduced, certain percentages introduced, if there are suitable people to do it. And, as in any case, it's often a judgment call as to how to react. The thing has to be clear and transparent, but there are a lot of criteria that have to be met for somebody to be suitable for any work, including the provision of a suitable place to work in the home. And if 10 candidates, all of them are suitable, and you only need 1 to be working, then management has to decide who are the 5 good for this stage, and maybe then roll the situation out further so that more people can be included as they go along. It's not, there's again, it's question of judgment management. there's no absolute easy solution to it.
Just on the point that you made between management making those types of decisions, is there any compulsion to engage with the union to ensure that management have appointed the right people and not just doing it for a point of favouritism, which can and does happen, and you end up with maybe a whistleblower coming along and saying, well, we know that so and so has been offered flexible working, and during their flexible working they're doing all of the things you mentioned, having their doctor's appointments, doing their dentist, getting hair appointments, attending the beauticians. Some of us might need to do that.
Or the barbers?
Some of us might need to do that more often than others, but and those sorts of things. And because of that, are the unions? There's a necessity for unions to actually be engaged in. So, is there a fairness seen here?
I would think that again. I would think that drawing up the criteria for reworking, there would be a case then for the unions, and to be perfectly honest, because it is yes, it could be seen to be there to get work as a favor, but at the same time, if somebody's going to hairdressers and beauticians and gyms and dentists and etc. all the time and they're going to work, and it should be very quickly seen they're not actually getting the work done. Work will be allocated, reasonable work will be allocated, and it has to be done for a certain period of time. And it would not be practical on a sustainable basis for somebody to be indulging in leisure activities and get their work done at the same time, unless there's a huge underestimate of the amount of work to be done in a certain period of time. So there's a productivity thing. If somebody is abusing the situation, it should become quite clear quite quickly, as long as it's been monitored correctly.
Well, thank you very much. Leona, that was very, very helpful indeed, and the committee appreciates your courtesy and the information that you gave us. We will review this session, and if you don't mind, if there are issues that we want to further correspond with you, we will be in touch. But thank you very, very much for your time.
It's a pleasure.
Take care.
Yes, no, thank you very much indeed.
And thank you.
Okay.
No, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Just to get it. That's good.
Members, can I just begin by apologising for being late and thanking Mitchell for...
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 30.
We move on now to the Budget Bill and the Spring Supplementary Estimates, evidence from DFP, and that's at number 5 on the agenda. So we have allocated about around 30 minutes for this session, so we should be finishing at around 11:25. The session is being recorded by Hansard, and therefore all electronic devices, with the exception of the committee tablet, must be switched off. As you know, they interfere with the transmission and the recording of proceedings. And can I refer you to the following DFP briefing papers? There's the Budget Bill letter from the Minister in respect of accelerated passage, NI 2014, and that's on page 60 of the packs. Then we have the Budget Bill and briefing paper, which is at page 62 of the packs. The DFP Spring Supplementary Estimates, pages 13 and 14, and they're at page 122 of the packs. We also have the Spring Supplementary Estimates cover note at page 132 of the packs. And finally, the letter to the Speaker regarding accelerated passage for the Budget Bill, and that's at page 133 of the packs. And of course, you have the big book of estimates here too. I'm sure you have them all read from cover to cover by this stage. Anyway, can I welcome our two witnesses to the committee, Peter Jacobson, from the Central Expenditure Division, and Jeff McGuinness from the same division. So, you're very welcome, gentlemen. Can I begin by asking you, just by way of background and in layman's terms, what is the relationship between the spring supplementary estimates and the monitoring round allocations? In particular, what were the major movements of money as summarised in the reconciliation at Annex A? That's page 66 of our packs.
Okay. Well, the relationship between the spring supplementary estimates and the monitoring rounds, of course, is that the starting point for this year was the main estimates back in June. The monitoring rounds amends the financial position throughout the financial year, and those movements are all reflected in the spring supplementary estimates. So there's a direct link from the main estimates to the spring supplementary, and the link there is the monitoring round movements and any technical changes that's been throughout the year. In terms of the main movements, I think Jeff, you will go through the main.
Certainly.
The main movements there.
You will see at that reconciliation there'll be a number of very significant allocations, easements and technicals that have occurred throughout each of the 3 monitoring rounds. In terms of the detail of those, if I maybe just run you through by department, for DARD there's an allocation of 17 million resource and 4.6 million capital. In terms of the detail underpinning those, the key components are a 3 million allocation in respect of the Common Agricultural Policy, 5.3 million allocated by the Executive in relation to a hardship scheme, a further 3 million for the Land Parcel Identification System, and 5.0 million in terms of TB compensation. That's the kind of the main ones within resource. Within capital, there was 3.3 allocated for the Northern Ireland Rural Development Programme and 1.3 for CAFRA building improvements. In terms of their easements, there's just a couple there that cover that 1.2 million in terms of $500,000 for Forestry Fund and then 0.8 million in relation to Northern Ireland Food Animal Information System. And then their technicals. The resource technical is probably the key one, and within that there are a number of transfers between departments, but the key transfer within that is just about £1 million to the Department of Health in relation to the MARA programme, which is maximising access to services, grants and benefits in the rural areas. For DECAL, the main allocations within their 5.2 and their 6.5 million relate to 3.3 million in relation to library services, 2.2 million in relation to tackle poverty and social exclusion. Those are both capital. There is a 2.5 million resource in relation to tackle poverty and social exclusion. 1.5 million was allocated in relation to World Police and Fire Games, and $1 million, both in resource and capital, was allocated in relation to the City of Culture Legacy Programme. Their reduced requirements, there are of that 9.5 million, 8.2 million is in relation to the Regional Stadia Programme. And then the 1.4 million was actually a receipt that was brought in relation to the sale of the site at the Balmoral Avenue. I think that's the Prony site. They haven't very many significant technicals, so we'll move on to the Department of Education. Their allocations, 5 million capital in relation to minor works, and there was 3.5 million resource in relation to the Delivering Social Change programme, and a further 2 million in relation to maintenance of the education estate. In terms of reduced requirements, the 2.7 million relates to the 5 million relates to of that there is a surplus receipts from asset disposals is the majority of that, which is 2.7 million. That's the easements. 2.7 million. That's surplus receipts from asset disposals. They have no significant technical requirements, so move on to Dell. In relation to their easement, which is the 9.2 million resource, The majority of that is taken up by a 6 million surrender in relation to the FE Colleges end-of-year flexibility scheme. So FE Colleges will get that back in June, or get back an amount that they feel they require of that 6 million. There's a number of other reduced requirements in there in relation to depreciation and impairments, which is ring-fenced 1.8 million, and one in relation to a youth employment scheme, which is 1 million that they couldn't spend. They'll have some significant technicals. There's 23.5 million resource, and that the majority of that, 22.1 million, is in relation to an increase to their student loans impairments line, and that's given directly from Treasury. So that's something that hasn't been taken away from other departments. It's a ring-fenced area that Treasury have provided the funding for. In relation to DETI, the 9.8 million, the majority of that is taken up by Invest NI trade initiatives, 4.5 million allocated to that, and 3 million allocated to the Tourist Board in relation to major events, including the G8, the City of Culture, the World Police and Fire Games. Of the 37.3 million allocations, 17 million of that was related to the purchase of the DETI, or the Invest NI HQ. 9 million was in relation to Invest NI access to finance, and there was a 10 million allocation in relation to the Agri-Food Industry Loan Scheme. For their easements, there's 6.2 million. The majority of that is a 4.3 million reduction through Invest NI for the Nitrates Directive, and of the 5.4, 5 million of that came back through a reduced requirement in relation to the Jobs and Economy Initiative. In relation to their technicals, 5 million is a technical surrender in relation to the Agri-Food Loan Scheme, which has delayed this year, so that it'll be reallocated back to them in the next financial year. DFP had no significant allocations in terms of easements. There's a 5.9 million easement, and that's a number of smaller items, including 2.1 million in relation to reduced requirement on legal cases, 1.6 million in relation to staff costs, and another million in relation to accommodation costs. Their technicals, DFP, the 5.7 million capital technicals includes and 4.2 million resource technicals includes 2.2 million transfer from the DOJ and a 3.2 million transfer also from DOJ in relation to IT Assist Confidential, which is bringing DOJ onto the IT Assist programme, but recognising that they have a level of security that needs to be increased, so hence the increased costs. In relation to health, there's a 56.9, 57 million allocation, and that's a number of allocations, including £30 million in January monitoring, £14 million in relation to elective care, 9.4 million in relation to transforming your care, and a number of other smaller items. The capital allocation, the majority of that is related to energy-related schemes, 12.5 million, and then 10 million for HSC infrastructure, 8 million for key equipment and scanners, and a number of other smaller allocations. Their reduced requirement for health, the 7 million in relation to capital, comes from capital released by the ERDF funding. Their technicals, that's 7 million in relation to the health technicals in resource, includes 3.3 million from Dell in relation to condition management programme, a number of other sort of smaller items, and 4.6 transfer from DSD for welfare reform. In relation to DOE, there's a 12.2 million resource allocation and a 2 million capital allocation. The majority of the 12.3, or the biggest item within there, is local government reform transition costs, which is a 5.1 million allocation from the executive. There's a 2 million in relation to dereliction and intervention schemes, 1.3 million in relation to de-renting, the de-rating of grant to councils, and a number of other smaller items. Capital allocations were in relation to Roe Valley Hydroelectric Scheme and heritage-led development. Their reduced requirement, 3.65 million reduced requirement in relation to DOE. The majority of that, 3.5 million, is in relation to local government, ICT and councillor severance. DOJ, they had an 11.6 million allocation and a 5 in resource and a 5 million in capital. The 11.6, the majority of that was a 10 million PSNI costs for the G8 that was allocated by the executive. That's the resource side, and 4.5. The 4.5 million capital is also in relation to PSNI costs for G8. The technicals, there's obviously a significant technicals in relation to DOJ, 93.8 million on the resource side and 13.7 million on the capital side of things. Most of that is in relation to drawdown under the EYF scheme arranged separately. They're separate arrangements for EYF. 10 million for PSNI, 26 million for the G8 drawdown, 16.7 in relation to PSNI hearing loss claim, and 44.5 million in relation to security funding drawdown, and 17.9 million capital also in relation to PSNI security funding drawdown. Now, the capital then is offset by 4.1 million going out in relation to technical transfers, including that transfer to DFP or IT Assist Confidential. DRD also have a number of very significant allocations and easements. In terms of their allocations, 20 million went to DRD to make up the shortfall in relation to the release of funds from the ports, which we thought we may get, but it hasn't worked out that way. In terms of their allocations for capital, there's 58 million of the 80 is made up of road structural maintenance, with a number of other items, including 7 million for new buses. In terms of the reduced requirements, you'll see DRD, there's a 36 of that 39, 36 million is a reduced requirement in relation to roads depreciation, which is a ring-fenced area. And of the 138 million, 108 million is in relation to the delay in the A5 Western Transport Corridor. For DSD, their allocations, there are 37.4 million capital, 15 million of which is in relation to co-ownership. 7.2 million is in relation to Get Britain building. There's a 4.0 million in relation to boiler replacement scheme and a number of other smaller items. The reduced requirements coming from the DSD side of things, of the 66.3 million, there's two fairly significant items. 39.8 comes from the Northern Ireland Housing Executive Housing Grant, and a further 10 million from the Northern Ireland Housing Executive for other items. And that makes up the sort of majority. Of the 9.4, 8.1 is in relation to Helm grant repayment that has come in. For OFM, DFM, there's a 37.4 million capital allocation. That is the majority of that. Sorry, no, there's a 26 million capital allocation for OFM, DFM. The majority of that is the 25 million University of Ulster loan funding, which is going, it's for the Dell project to relocate the University of Ulster into the city centre, but the SIB are involved in that, and they are providing that loan, so it goes through OFM, DFM. In relation to the 10.6, there are 3.8 million of that is in relation to historical institutional abuse inquiry allocation, and another 2 million for delivering social change. And the final sort of significant item within that annex is the 4.1 million easement in relation to OFM DFM, you'll be pleased to know. And that is, the majority of that is in relation to the Maze Long Kesh Development Corporation, 3.5 million.
Okay, Thank you very much.
Was the half hour just for the first question?
No, I think that information will be useful. It will be in Hansard, and we are going to attempt to make sure that Hansard is available as early as possible, because sometimes, much of the debate is taken up by questions about these very things. So it'll be useful for members for this committee and for other committees to have that information at their disposal, hopefully before the debate begins. Can I ask you, how does the DFP ensure that the Executive's main priorities are still to the fore and that value for money is being achieved in these movements of expenditure on this scale during the in-year monitoring rounds? Because it's obviously easy for the priorities to fall by the wayside.
Yeah. Well, first of all the easements have to come back to the Executive for reallocation, so that's a given. The allocations, of course, agreed by the Executive, and the Executive agreed those based on their priorities. So, they wouldn't agree an allocation that wasn't high in their priority list. Bids are obviously also prioritised by departments when they are submitted to DFP, and the proposal that goes to the Executive reflects those priorities.
So, in the bidding process, the bids are very clearly linked to the priorities, and in the allocation process, likewise.
That's part of the criteria. When departments submit their bids, they need to make it clear how they fit in with the Executive's priorities.
Okay. Well, can you outline what steps you have taken to ensure that there has been the appropriate consultation as required under Standing Order 42.2, and upon which the committee decides whether or not to grant accelerated passage to the bill?
Yeah, this is obviously a critical issue for us to get the bill through in time. The steps that have been taken is that all departments have been in front of their committees in terms of their monitoring proposals, and the committees have scrutinised those proposals before they go to DFP. So that is the main vehicle for ensuring that there's that scrutiny.
Okay. Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. And thank you very much for the detailed step through. It is helpful, I have to say. With reference to paragraphs 7 and 8 in the briefing paper, could you speak some more about the rationale and justification for the 3 areas of headroom that have been built into the estimates in terms of justice and health and social services and debt?
Yeah. You obviously recognise those numbers from the January monitoring. It's basically what's left over, but those departments didn't get pretty much in January monitoring. So it's areas where we can spend money this year. That's one. The rationale for it is to make sure that we don't lose any money to Treasury at the year end. So if a lot of easements come out between now and end of March, they said it was clear it needed somewhere to put that money if it comes out, to make sure we don't breach the budget exchange scheme limit. Okay, so that's the reason why that's in there. The critical point here is that departments can't abuse that. It's ring fenced, so departments can't use that headroom for anything else.
Maybe on the third issue, the Dell student loans issue, that came about.
Kind of a last minute
yes,
development.
It's a very recent change from
yeah.
the UK's.
I suppose what I'm getting at is, we understand headroom and the concept of it. It appears to me, anyway, that this is more significant than in previous years, and we are setting out a contingency here for bad financial management. Is that not the case?
No, it will only be used
more than we did last year, for example.
Yeah, but no, this will only be used if there are significant easements come back from the departments over the next 2 months. Otherwise, that will not be used. Simple.
Well, no, I understand that. No, I do understand that. But it's the fact that we've had to have this contingency. Does that not indicate that there is at least a lack of confidence that the department are on top of their budget?
What happened last year was there was easements came back towards the year end.
Yeah.
And we wanted to make sure that we can definitely use it if it does happen again.
At the time also of preparation of the SSEs, we have we weren't sure what the position would be in welfare reform. So we're holding 15 million additional money at the centre just in case we have to pay the penalties in welfare reform. And should that become available, and that's probably why it's slightly increased from last year, that there is that kind of unique situation that's sitting at the centre at the minute. So we're prepared to pay that back to Treasury. However, should there be progress on welfare reform, then the headroom can be used for that particular purpose.
And just for the record, the 35 million in terms of health and social services is in addition to the 30 million in the previous 14 in the monitoring range. So this is in addition.
Be further.
Yeah. And the explanation is that we're giving it to health because they could spend it.
Yeah.
Not that health need it.
It's well, they say they clearly say they need it because they've been in January monitoring. But it's now where they can spend that towards the year end. Most departments can't ramp up their spend very quickly. That's the issue.
Right, this is probably my fault, but how would I find the 35 million in that Annex A there? I was trying to figure out. Is it reflected in it?
No, it's not reflected.
Not in
These are the agreed changes.
No wonder I couldn't find it.
No, because these are movements that already has happened.
That the executive have approved. This 35 million wouldn't be in there yet. No. It would.
Okay. No, okay. That you kind of explained it to me. I just wish I had asked you sooner. See the variance in the special terms that were agreed for health at the start of the budget, going back to 2011. It would seem, given the monitoring performance outcomes, that we've moved off that agreed position. Remind ourselves just that in 2011, or in the run into that kind of budget period, health was allowed to kind of keep its own kind of reduced requirements. And the kind of the quid pro quo was that they wouldn't be bidding in monitoring rounds except where they could demonstrate exceptional need. But we seem to have either relaxed that arrangement informally, or for some reason anyway. It seems health's in there now bidding along with everybody else.
They are, and it doesn't preclude obviously health getting an allocation.
No.
And it doesn't stop them bidding either. But yeah, the position still is. They shouldn't be bidding unless it's unforeseen major. Now, health obviously viewed those bids.
Was that Edmund Pitt?
It's a bit bid.
It's another bid. No,
major and unforeseeable circumstances, I think, was the phrase that was used.
Health argued that their bids were major and unforeseen. Executive took the decision to give them meet some of those bids.
Okay, and did I detect that if the executive were satisfied, that didn't necessarily mean that at the official level you were satisfied?
I think we were reasonably content with some of those. Others, I think it's not a black and white issue. I think there's a judgment call on those ones.
And I suppose just a final point, and thanks for that. With reference to paragraph 8, the DEL headroom, does the recent change that you've referred to on how student loans are recorded have any negative impact on the monies that will be controlled by the executive, or is this what you would call a technical adjustment?
It's more of a technical adjustment.
Slightly. There will be some.
The DEL issue, maybe.
Yeah, there will be some impact in terms of if there is a. If it goes beyond what the budgets that we have forecast at this stage, I think it's something along the lines of 1/29th or 1/30th of the pressure will be met by the executive, which is the 0.6 million that we have included in there just in case.
And given that there is, that sounds like a probable impact, doesn't it? I mean, you expect that?
We're not sure, but yeah, we expect it's prudent to plan for.
Yeah, and what are the protocols there? I mean, does that require a consultation or prior discussion with Treasury before those kind of impacts come? Or they just land on our desk?
They land on our desk.
In this case, it land on our desk. We prefer consultation, obviously, and we will take it up with Treasury.
Is there any protocols that are meant to be enacted in these circumstances?
Not on technical. This is what they would require. Call it technical.
Doesn't make kind of development budgets and maintaining budget lines any easier, does it? If they can act unilaterally.
It's unusual, and they recognise that it's unusual. Normally, what happens is that they will provide in advance of the financial year what they call consolidated budgeting guidance, which has the kind of all the rules within it, and they will ask for comments on any changes that they have made, and that's actually happening at the moment. However, this was put in unilaterally.
Okay, and I mean, what it does, it pushes you in the direction of this headroom, which I think then, as we discovered in the early days of the Assembly and kind of getting to grips with the budgeting process, actually masks some inefficiencies in our own kind of approach in our budget management, our financial projection systems and whatever. Are we sliding back into that area again? I mean, it's not a good habit. It gives too much of a comfort zone, I think.
Well, in terms of the student loans, definitely not, because that is
no,
a
that
technical issue.
Clearly,
The other headroom issue, it is the budget same scheme issue. There's no doubt of that. That is why we put that in. And as Jeff explained,
there's alarm bells going off my head about the quantum here. You know, it's very significant sums. And you know, given the pressures that's on the health budget, for having that kind of degree of flexibility, you just wonder what's going on underneath the surface there. I just have a feeling that we haven't got the full picture there.
Well, certainly this doesn't give health flexibility unless additional funds appear from other areas. So health would be very much disregarding this in terms of trying to achieve their own budget this year. It's just if something happens later on in the year, and money does come out of the system somewhere, but at this moment in time, health would be definitely...
And just finally then on that, has the Health Committee, obviously they're across this, the estimates, they're alert and are aware of this headroom arrangement?
I would assume that the officials would be
officials should have clarified that with their committee.
But they haven't flagged anything up to you?
Haven't flagged anything up to us.
Can we check that, cross-check that?
Sure.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mitchell. Can I ask you how confident the department is that they will not be returning monies to the Treasury and can ensure that they remain within the budgetary exchange scheme limits?
Well, clearly on the resource side, we're very confident because the headroom is built in to deal with that. On the capital side, we are monitoring on a weekly basis any easements that might come out. At the moment, we're not aware of any. So we will take action there as well if anything happens on the capital side. So we are fairly confident we won't hand anything back. Certainly on the resource side, we're sure we won't, because we build in enough flexibility here that it won't happen. Capital side is always more difficult because it's difficult to spend capital towards the year end, and we can only carry forward somewhere in the region of 12 to 13 million. So it doesn't take much to get to that. But at the moment, there's no indication from any departments there's any major easements coming out.
Okay. Just with reference to paragraph 4 of the briefing paper, that's page 63 of our packs, where it refers to outturn. While the provisional outturn for all departments is reported to the Assembly in June-July, how and when do we receive a similar composite report on the final outturn?
Final outturn are normally not reported because it's so late in the year. It's really at departmental account stage. The final outturn just reflects departmental accounts. They're signed off normally in July, I think, Jeff? July, August time.
Report to the Assembly.
And there's a report to the Assembly on that. So that's the time
There's a
when you
report
get
led before the Assembly on it?
The departmental accounts are led before the Assembly.
Yeah, at departmental stage. There is no report to the Assembly that draws all that together, but it's simply just in the departmental accounts.
Okay. So, move on, and Leslie has indicated.
Thanks, Chair. That last point you make is a good one, because you actually have to go and look for those figures. You know, whereas it's actually, I appreciate it's there, but it's the missing part of the jigsaw.
Yeah.
Probably would be nice to have that just at the end of the line. We're going to perhaps reflect upon it. I find the reconciliation detail, gentlemen, by both of you was very helpful. I'm just looking to see where I could find that detail. Certainly won't find it in the page numbers quoted. Will I simply have to comb, or will I have the information in the 3 monitoring rounds?
Most of that certainly is in the monitoring rounds.
And the rest of it then, where is it?
The technicals, you would see some of them in the monitoring rounds. For example, reclassifications is shown in the tables in the monitoring round. and any internal movements above the de minimis limit is shown in the monitoring papers. But small movements you won't see actually anywhere.
It can be hundreds or thousands throughout a year. In terms
really
of
small movements between departments, you won't actually see.
That makes it very hard for us then to reconcile, because all those small amounts of 100,000 add up.
Yeah, and that's why we give you that table to reconcile back, because it is part of the picture.
I think on previous occasions we have asked for that detail.
That detail, yeah.
And in fact, there were a number of occasions when questions were asked here about the technicals, when the officials themselves weren't aware of what they were, where they came from. So, I mean, if you don't know, how are we going to find out?
Happy to provide the detail.
Yeah, happy to provide the detail that I have.
It would be useful, and obviously we have Hansard, which would be helpful as well. But
no, we're happy to provide the full detail.
When you are doing a read across, the bits missing, you know, you just can't do it.
Enough, yeah.
The returns for later allocation always concern me, because that's money coming back in, but really it's earmarked. Is there any way we can clearly identify those sums in the budgets?
When it comes in very late in the year?
You know, when it's transferred on the basis that it's going to be reallocated?
Well, if we're talking about the late reallocation, well, potentially late reallocation exercise, well, the headroom obviously gives you a clue to where the money will go if anything becomes available. It's DOJ and DHSS. Okay, so that's where it will go. It's the only place it can go if there is any money coming in at the year end.
Yeah, but I don't want to get involved in the nitty-gritty because it sort of clouds the issue. But if, for example, mid-year the department surrenders a certain amount of money because a project was going to be transferred to next year, that's returned, and obviously can be reallocated for something else on the clear understanding that sum's going to be available to them next year.
Oh well, there's never that clear understanding.
Unless it's in the executive.
Unless the executive agrees that, and it very rarely do. Most of the time, the departments just hand the money back, and they can make a case next year for the money and get bid for it, but they're not guaranteed to get it.
Good. You say they make the case, in other words, they make a bid for it.
Make a bid, absolutely.
There's nothing sort of ring fenced.
No.
The one thing that is will be the FE Colleges EYF scheme and the DE Schools EYF scheme, because the FE Colleges and the schools run on a different financial year, so it's very hard for them to plan for our financial year at the same time. So the executive agreed to EYF schemes in relation to those. Those are both capped, so that they can't build up a stock and use it. But that would be an exception.
It's highlighted too, isn't it?
Yes.
Two other quick points. I like this term headroom. This is a nice one. Last year we used the term overcommitment. Could you explain what the difference is between the two? In effect,
at the same stage, we used the word overcommitment as opposed to headroom. Well, I think the two are synonymous then. If it means money, extra flexibility.
Last year we
saving on letters
attempted to handle this, the surplus, potential surplus, by overcommitment.
Well, we've overcommitted again in January monitoring, as you know.
I'm going to get to that.
Yes, we allocated out 25 million more than was available. So any money comes into the year end, we'll have to make that good first of all. Okay.
Right. So can we add sort of the overcommitment and the headroom together?
No, not really.
Get a slush fund or a cushion?
No.
Overcommitment is a budget term, whereas headroom would be more of an estimates term. Headroom refers to the legal ability to spend additional money, whereas overcommitment would be in relation to how we manage our budgets.
Right, so subtle difference between the two.
Subtle difference, yeah.
And the last question, how much money is in the centre at this point in time?
Fair enough. Jeff has the numbers.
I have the numbers, yes. I suspected this might come up. At the centre, at this point in time, we have 5.9 million capital DEL in relation to loan and equity. That's the financial transactions capital. We have an agreement from Treasury that we can bring that forward in the next year. So that's sitting at the centre. We're holding 15 million in relation to welfare reform penalties, and we expect that we'll potentially be giving some or all of that to Treasury. There's the regional rates income sits at the centre, as does the RRI borrowing amount. And the final thing that sits, as well as that, the RI interest repayment of 47.4 million sits at the centre. And then we're sitting with the overcommitment at the centre as well, which is 24.8 million resource over commitment, and an additional amount of ring-fenced resource non-cash, which is 23.4. We can't use that for anything that's ring-fenced depreciation impairments, so departments have indicated they don't need that money, so that money will go back.
Can I find those figures anywhere in here?
No, the estimates are departmental estimates. They are only voted what the departments will spend, whereas this is the centre items, and there's no vote for it.
Okay, thank you for that, gentlemen.
Any other questions?
No, just something that I just cannot quite get my head around. It's mention was made about Department of Regional Development depreciation of assets, and on the basis of depreciation of assets, DRD being roads.
I think it said roads depreciation.
Yes,
depreciation.
On the basis of that, would that not be classed as maintenance?
This is a non-cash item, so they will take an assessment of the value of the land or the roads, and there'll be a depreciation factor associated with it. Now, in this case, it hasn't depreciated as significantly as they had assumed that it would, whatever land that they've been revaluing. So they have a £36 million reduced requirement, so it comes back. But it's a non-cash item, so it doesn't translate into...
It's just, I wonder how you actually factor in money for something which you are saying will devalue, and where that would have been reallocated to. Does that go into the maintenance budget, or what way does it work?
No, it is ring-fenced.
It's ring-fenced, that's the important bit, and it's non-cash.
There's no
cash.
cash.
Can't use it for anything else.
Yeah. We couldn't take that reduced requirement and spend it on health, elective care. We just couldn't do that. The Treasury won't allow us to do that.
Okay. Mitchell?
Yeah. I thought it might have come up in discussion. The A5, what happened to that? Or where did we find?
Fell off, they have to bid for it again.
Well, yeah, there was 108 million, I think it was, handed back in June.
Small sum, you would
Small
call it.
sum. And that was reallocated out again to various capital projects. Mainly, I think health and DRD probably was the main beneficiaries on the capital side.
And has the executive agreed any position in relation to the scheme being revived?
They're still committed to the scheme. At the moment, there's still not clarity on the legal side of things. So until that's clarified, we can't move the scheme ahead.
But we can't anticipate that the legals would be sorted and the surveys that weren't done will be done in the next 12 months, and therefore it will have to be reflected in our estimate.
Our understanding is it won't happen until 15-16 at the earliest. There'll be no spend next year. Apparently, it won't be sorted out.
Okay, so there's going to be no spend on it next year. That's why it's not.
At the moment, yeah.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Okay, Leslie?
Yeah, Chair, just one last question. The review of the financial process, where are we with that? Will this would all become beautifully clear, brilliantly clear for all of us?
We are no further ahead than we were probably last time we spoke to you about this. It's still stuck where we were last time.
And no headroom.
No headroom, no progress. No further progress, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. And no doubt we will be hearing from you in the future. Can I ask the committee to support a proposal that we have a composite version of the final outturn report as suggested by Leslie and others, covering all the departments, so that we can more easily compare across and between departments. Members agreed with that?
Agreed, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So we've now reached the time where we need to take a decision on accelerated passage for the Budget Bill Northern Ireland 2014, because that information needs to be conveyed to the Speaker by the 11th of February, which is the date scheduled for the second stage. So if members are content, may I put the question that the Committee for Finance and Personnel is satisfied that there has been appropriate consultation with it on the public expenditure proposals contained in the Budget Bill Northern Ireland 2014 and is content to grant accelerated passage to the bill in accordance with Standing Order 42.2. Members agreed? Agreed. Thank you. So can I ask the clerk to draft a letter to the Speaker confirming this decision?
I think it's finished.
Chair, there's one prepared earlier at page 62 of the pack,
okay.
Based on previous years.
Wondering to please, Peter.
Well, thank you very much for that.
Sorry, it's actually page 133 of the pack.
So members are content that that be forwarded to the Speaker?
Yes.
Okay. The briefing paper at page 62 of the pack referring to other departments' provision for headroom. Are members content that that is copied to the relevant other committees for information?
Yes.
Agreed.
Chair, just in another paper that DFP has provided, it was at pages 122 to 127 of the pack. It's the first time the department has provided that type of paper. It basically sets out the changes between budget and spring supplementary estimates in terms of the DFP as a department. It might provide a model for other departments to provide their committees with the same type of information. So if members were content, it could be copied out to the other committees for information, and in terms of whether they wanted to arrange a similar briefing in the future with anyone.
Okay. Members content, yeah?
Yeah, and I'm sure it's noted that we're going to follow up with the Health Committee as well to see if they...
if they've been informed of the changes
across that,
okay.
Especially the 35 million.
Thank you. I move on to item number 6 now, which is EU funding. Update briefing from SEUPB and DFP. This session has been allocated 45 minutes, but has been cancelled by DFP at short notice. Can I just advise you of the background to this? The item was to form the main item of today's business and has been scheduled in the committee forward work programme and notified to the department since the 11th of December 2013. However, no briefing paper has been received in time, and on Monday past, DFP officials requested that it be cancelled. Given the short notice, it was too late to reschedule an alternative briefing. DFP officials have, however, been asked to attend today to provide an explanation, and Mr. Frank Duffy, head of the European Union Division, is here for that purpose. So, you're very welcome, Mr. Duffy. We have some questions on this situation that has arisen, which obviously the committee here is not content about. Can I ask you, when was the briefing paper for today's session sent to the Minister for clearance? And if this was after Wednesday the 29th of January, when the paper should have been given to the committee, and why was it left so late to obtain ministerial clearance?
First of all, Mr. Chairman and committee members, can I offer my profound apologies that this situation has occurred. You haven't had the evidence session that was scheduled for this morning between ourselves and SEUPB. We were hoping to provide you with a paper that would give you an update on the current Peace and Interreg programmes, and also the development of the new operational programmes for Peace 4 and Interreg 5 in the new programming period. By way of mitigation, to answer your questions, first of all, Mr. Chairman, it was not provided to the Minister's office on Wednesday the 29th as prescribed. By way of mitigation, can I explain that unfortunately we're not masters of our own destiny in relation to pulling together the operational programmes for Peace and Interreg for 2014 and 20. We have to coordinate the input from 2 member states, 3 different administrations and about 7 different departments. As you can imagine, it's a fairly complex task, and it's also a fluid task in where the allocation of monies at the national level
are changing as subject to challenge. As an illustration of that, only at 3rd February were we notified of the formal allocations of the European Territorial Cooperation monies, which is effectively Interreg monies. The oversight, it was entirely down to the fact that myself and my team, we were trying to provide as comprehensive a package of information as we could to the committee, to give you the current situation and hopefully to give you detailed information on the proposed allocations within the draft operational programmes. But unfortunately, with the number of people involved in it and travel arrangements, we weren't able to get the information together. So by the time it was submitted, it was too late and it missed the committee's deadline. And for that, I apologise. I have been over the ground with my own team, and I'm very disappointed that this has happened. And I'm taking steps. I'm taking over the new head of division and to make sure that this does not happen again, and that deadlines are respected, and that if there is going to be a problem, that the committee gets early notification.
Yeah,
and
well, that's what I was going to
change.
say to you. You know, considering the fact that you were notified on the 11th of December that this session was scheduled, and also considering the fact that, as you said in your evidence, that there are difficulties in marshalling all of this information. Would it not have been sensible of you to flag this up with the clerk of the committee and say that there was a possibility that you would not have been able to meet the deadline, so that the committee would have been in a position to schedule another briefing instead of leaving things to what is virtually last minute?
I accept that, Chair. I think, I mean, again, by way of mitigation, I was out of the country at the end of last week. I think the team had recognised that they were likely to be a day or so late. I think it was longer than they anticipated. They should have notified the clerk.
Right. Can I ask you when the paper will be available to the committee?
We're just waiting. What's happened is, as I mentioned to you, the latest information has come through on the 3rd of February. We have to factor that in. I've had meetings with colleagues in the Republic of Ireland who also put input into the Interreg programme. And we have a draft. We have to get that draft cleared through our various parts of our department, Finance Minister's Office, and then submit it to the committee itself. It should be. It's at the very late stages of a draft that would be ready to go to the committee. I would say now that we've moved on from the fact that we've missed the deadline.
Okay. You did say that you were taken over as head of this division, and that you would ensure that a situation like this would not arise again. What specific steps will you take to ensure that it doesn't?
I think, first of all, that staff themselves understand that what the deadline is for submission to the committee, what the procedures are in relation to clearance of papers, and, as you noted, Chair, if there is going to be a problem, early notification to the clerk, to the committee. Pick up the phone, have a conversation, find out what the issues are, and find out what options you have available to you, and then address that.
Okay. Any other members?
Just
yes, Paul.
Yes. I would like to know just where the hiatus has occurred, and whether it's the bureaucratic monster of the EU, or is it SEUPB? Whatever, where did the problem arise? I appreciate that you're being quite candid in saying that you're holding your hands up about the department's aspect of this, but obviously to present the case you had to get information from other bodies, and I would like to know where the problem has or did arise.
Chair, putting together an operational programme, first of all, what happens is the European Union itself has to agree a financial framework, which is basically the allocation of monies to member states. That was done very late in the day. I think a lot of it had been, my understanding was, it had been anticipated that this would happen earlier in the year. Certainly under the previous programme, it happened as a much earlier process. But there were disputes with the European Parliament. So eventually it was not officially registered until the 20th of December. That effectively sets the clock ticking. Now, in order to, once the allocations are made, you then look to see what the operational programme is going to look like, what the allocation of money might be. That involves having looked at what the consultation process has said, what various departments are saying to you, what the various member states and administrations involved are saying, and then trying to put together a programme that satisfies the European Union's own themes that have been identified as the priorities for that. So you can imagine there's a very long iterative process that takes place within this, and it's really dependent on some decisions being made by others, which then trigger decisions that you can make yourself. I think we were over-ambitious, frankly, in terms of the time frame that we had, and I think the Chair is correct. Early notification to the committee clerk and seeking a postponement would have been the wiser event.
Chair,
Yes, John.
well, could I just
Sorry, Paul, you finished?
It was just on the basis of I appreciate getting information from Europe on the 20th of December, like on the mouth of Christmas. You know, that's another issue. But that had been sought quite some time before that. It took them.
It's part of the process, Chair. It's what happened was in order to approve European expenditure, you have to go through the Commission itself puts forward various proposals, but ultimately it had to be ratified by the European Parliament. And the European Parliament, there was a number of political issues taking place that caused the postponement of the vote and agreement of the framework itself.
Well, I think on this occasion, you know, we can be quite flexible in relation to what we're trying to do here, but sometimes when we're working with these bodies, the inflexibility of what they deal with whenever their people are applying to them for funding is another thing. You miss deadlines with them, you miss your money.
Okay, thanks, Paul. John?
I was just going to ask, Chair, Frank, is most of that not like an ongoing process, that all the contacts you have with those various, you know, other administrations, Europe, you know, is that not a fairly ongoing process all of the time?
I mean, it is an iterative process, but there are certain trigger dates that kick in. For example, once the framework is agreed, then there's a trigger point after which you're expected to have the operational programmes. There's a thing called, what has to be agreed is, first of all, a partnership agreement at the member state level. And there's a chapter for Northern Ireland and Wales and Scotland within that partnership agreement. So that has to be agreed with the lead department, which is the Business, Innovation and Science Department in Whitehall. That then is submitted itself to the Commission, and the Commission itself then has to agree that as the chapter. Once that partnership agreement is set, it then determines. You have set out the themes, what's the need and what themes you intend to tackle, how you intend to tackle them, and the evidence of what you're going to do to actually make a difference. What are the outcomes? And there's a certain time frame then kicks in for when you have to submit your operational programmes. It's normally, in the case of ours, 3 months after the date of the agreement. So we have until the 22nd of April to have these submitted.
But even at that, you know, your team would have known, or should have probably have known even this day last week, that they weren't going to make the deadline.
I think,
you know, that would have given. Like,
I think it was a classic case of hoping for exactitude, and that the information that you would give would be more informative, and that was the thief of time. And in doing that, they should have realised that in fact this was a scheduled committee meeting. It was an important piece of business for you, and that it was a complex area of business, and therefore time was required to actually understand the information that was going to be presented to them. And the quest for exactitude at the end of the time, that I think they did it with the best will in the world, but I think they have to recognise that you're busy people, and it's important that they actually recognise and respect the deadlines.
Thanks.
Okay, Keila?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Frank, for being very frank with us.
I've been said to me before, unfortunately.
You're very brave coming here today. I think it just flags up the bureaucracy within the bureaucrat, basically. But basically, where you go from here now, what just directed at yourself in your own department, what have you learned from this, and what changes are you going to make, you know, so that this doesn't happen again?
I think the one thing is that, you know, it's like the old advert used to say, we should be talking. The need for conversation, the need for an early conversation and better linkages with the committee clerk. I think the team itself, there's some development work that would obviously be needed to understand the processes that happen here in the Assembly, the important scrutiny role that committee has, and understanding that the deadlines are there for a purpose, and they're not there as if that they can slip easily at someone's whim, that they understand that there is an important process that must be followed to the letter, and that there's any problems with that early notification. I think people don't like bad news, but you actually prefer to have at least early notification that it might be coming rather than it become a surprise.
And has that been echoed already? I mean, is that, in terms of getting that back?
I was out of the office on Friday, as I mentioned to the Chair, and I was out of the office yesterday, and again, it's part and parcel of the nature of my business. So today was the first day I was back in the office, and I've made it abundantly clear that I think we need to address this issue.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Michaela. And Mr Duffy, can I point out to you that the guidance for interaction between the Assembly committees and departments sets out the agreed timescales for the provision of papers to the committee as no later than 5 working days before the briefing. So that protocol is already there, and obviously we would urge you to adhere to that in the future. And if problems do arise in relation to the unavailability of information which is outside your remit at that particular time, the committee clerk should be informed in good time so that the committee can reschedule other business. Okay. Well, thank you for attending today, and can I ask you to liaise with the committee staff here and ensure that this important briefing is rescheduled as soon as possible.
I will indeed, Chairman, and thank you and the committee members for your patience and forbearance in this one, and I do apologise again.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, we'll move on to item number 7. 10 minutes has been allocated for this European Commission Work Programme 2014 response to the OFM-DFM Committee. Committee previously considered this item of business and agreed to write to the Department for further information which would inform members' deliberations on the matter. This information request was due for response on Friday the 31st of January. A response from DFP has not been received. Therefore, this item will be considered at next week's meeting. Members, content?
Sorry?
Suppose you don't have much choice.
Yeah, I'm not sure content's exactly the right word, but
okay. We'll move on to item number 8 then, further amendment to the Financial Provisions Bill. We have scheduled 5 minutes for this. The committee, there's a briefing paper at pages 197, 198 of your packs. The committee was advised of this late amendment to the bill at a recent DFP briefing. The wording of the amendment is provided for information ahead of the consideration stage. Are members content?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, we'll move on to item number 9, which is correspondence, and ask the clerk to deal with those items.
Just 2 items I'll draw members' attention to, Chair. Page 202 of the pack, it's DFP writing regarding 2 new statutory rules in response to non-transposition of EU directives. This is in relation to building control, building regulations, and the members had raised some queries, I think, from memory around this issue at the previous briefing from officials. In the correspondence, the Department's advising that in order to mitigate the risk of financial penalties from Europe, it will need to condense the timetable for the 2 statutory rules, including setting aside the 21-day rule, which is important, and if the committee had concerns and was minded to pray against a negative resolution statutory rule. Officials have indicated that they will be available to discuss any issue of concern. So just given the circumstances, just wanted to ask if members wish to schedule a briefing from officials on the outcome of the consultations and before decisions are taken on the statutory rules, so that the committee has all its necessary briefing ahead of taking any decisions.
Members agreed?
Yeah.
Okay, and then at page 243 of the pack, it's a DFP response to an issue relating to energy efficiency in Addenbrooke's Hospital. It was a query that had been originally raised by the ETI committee, and it's just to get members' agreement to copy that on to that committee for information.
Agreed? Thank you. We'll move on to item number 10. If there are no further questions on that, that's the committee work programme, and I'll ask the clerk to outline that.
Yeah, Chair, the committee has agreed to undertake a scrutiny of sick absence following a referral of the Audit Office report on sick absence to this committee from PAC. And there's an initial briefing on the report is scheduled for the 19th of February. But the report is cross-departmental, so it deals, as well as cross-departmental within the civil service, it also deals with the health sector and education as well in terms of the arm's length bodies. It's just to seek agreement that in preparation for the scrutiny exercise, a letter is issued to the relevant statutory committees seeking their views on the report findings. The Audit Office officials have confirmed or have offered to brief the other committees should that be deemed necessary to inform their deliberations. So it's important that this committee gathers the views of the other responsible committees before it kind of takes its evidence from DFP, Chair.
Paul?
It's good to have all the evidence coming from other departments and everything else and seeing where there's maybe variance within department. I think it'd be helpful to get maybe an evidence session from a private sector major employer. We have some very large employers from the private sector who can maybe give us some input as to how they deal with this matter within their organisations and what levels of sickness absence they seem to have among their staff, some of which are carrying out both manual and something similar functions as what we're dealing with here.
Okay, yes, Michaela?
Sorry, Paul.
I'm just appreciate we deal mainly with arm's length bodies and the departments, but you know, I think sometimes it might be worthwhile asking some of them to come in and do that.
So just wondering, should I approach an umbrella group like the likes of the CBI?
Can we just hear what Michaela has to say?
No, all I wanted to say, Chair, was just under protocol, would it be, I'm not sure, that's why I'm asking, is it necessary for me to declare an interest as Chair of the PAC, pass this on? I don't know.
We can record that, yeah.
Okay,
just note that she changed her hat.
Right. Mitchell, did you want to come in on that?
No, I think it's covered.
Right, so by way of comparison, Paul's suggesting that we invite a private sector body, or as the clerk says, an umbrella group for the private sector, like the CBI, to come in and give us a briefing on the levels of sickness in the private sector and what measures are used to deal with to reduce levels of sickness. Are members content with that?
There is, I think the PAC addressed the reasons, you know, stress related and so on and so on. A comparator with the private sector in terms of the explanations for sick absence in the public sector might be worth looking at. Okay. See if there are different factors.
We'll include that as well.
Yeah, I think
other
could be
comments?
incorporated. It could be incorporated within that.
The same session, yeah.
Sure, I don't know whether CBI would be the best way to monitor that.
Okay.
I don't know that they
have
would
you
have that information.
any suggestions?
The trouble is, there are so many other groups,
Other
industries and so forth and so on. Now it's such a variation. Right down to SMEs, where there's no way whether FSB would have that. I wouldn't think so.
Right.
I'm talking about maybe some major employers.
A major employer
that are maybe working.
How representative is that, Paul? That's the question, you know.
A paper.
Only a few of them.
Would it be as an alternative to that, because you know the private sector is quite fragmented by comparison to the public sector? Would it be acceptable for us to commission a research paper which would draw the comparisons that you've outlined in your proposal?
Well, I think that'd be quite helpful.
Yeah. Or any existing research I was going to suggest.
Yeah.
You know, that we may not need to reinvent the wheel.
Okay.
No.
We'll ask the clerk to look into that, and we consider it again next week. Okay. Thank you very much. Any other comments on the work programme, Shane?
It's fairly full up until Easter recess, Chair. So. It's published each week and updated each week, as members will be aware.
Right, but can I seek agreement that in preparation for the scrutiny exercise in relation to the sickness absence in the public sector, that a letter is issued to all the relevant statutory committees seeking their views on the report? Okay, agreed. Thank you. All right. Are members content that the work programme be updated to reflect any agreements made today and published on the committee website? Agreed. Okay. A meeting will be held at the Construction Federation. That's the next meeting on the 12th of February. Members, it's 143 Malone Road, the address is. So I'm asking, do you want to travel there by your own transport, or would you prefer a minibus from Parliament Buildings to take you there and back? Don't all speak at the same time.
Minibus is always better.
Minibus, yeah.
Yeah, parking's the issue, so minibus.
Can I have a rough indication of how many people would use the minibus?
What time would the minibus?
We would probably leaving at 9:30.
What time would we be back at, just?
Probably
12:30, quarter to 1.
Originally, yeah.
Right. So, minibus.
All decided.
Right.
Probably
2, 3, 4,
5,
7, 6 anyway. So I said we'll book one for 8.
They said your house.
And we'll have a contingency or headroom for 2 others. Okay.
Make sure there's a bit of headroom there.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. Any other business? Any other business? No. Okay. Thank you very much. So advise members that the next meeting will be held, as I said, at the Construction Federation Employers Headquarters, 103 Malone Road, Belfast. Members content, I put the question at the committee. Do now adjourn. Read it.
Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 30. This